What's the closest situation to snakes on a plane that you've had?
I did have a couple one time that had a dog with him. They just brought him in the cabin and he sat on the floor. And at one point I was flying, I looked at, there was a dog doing this, trying to get under my arm for me to pet him. And I thought, there's something I'm not used to, is a dog in the cockpit. I'm Rob Mark. I've been flying for more than 50 years. I'm a retired business jet pilot, a former air traffic controller, and today we're going to take a look at some films that feature emergency landings, and we're going to talk about them a little bit after we watch. The first movie we're going to take a look at is Flight.
All right, Margaret, get everybody strapped in. Get everybody strapped in tight.
Ladies and gentlemen,
It's pulling left hard, sir.
This particular film that we're looking at is based loosely on an actual accident that happened to an Alaska Airlines flight off the west coast of California some years ago. When I watched this actually, and I saw that control wheel get pulled out of the first officer's hands, it was scary, even though I know it's a movie, because if that happened in real life, we would be really upset.
Dump the flaps, dump the flaps. Just do it fast. Just do it. Do it. 30 degrees. 315. We'll try our best. All right, that bought us a little time. Now we got to revert to manual control. Your side first. Okay, got it. Nothing, no control.
Absolutely, there's an emergency checklist. It's like a decision tree. If this happens, then try this and this and this in this order. But this particular one where the controls basically failed, the vertical control, this is almost not even in the book because everything they were trying already wasn't working.
Yeah.
Okay, on the count of 3, I want you to pull it up, turn it clockwise, push it back down. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Flight attendants are in the cockpit at times. They don't spend a great deal of time in the cockpit. At least they're not supposed to, because the cabin crew, which are the flight attendants, are, they have their job, they have their area of responsibility from the cockpit door through the back end of the cabin. And the flight crew has the responsibility of the plane from the doors forward. He is taking a risk by asking the flight attendant to come forward from the cabin, but at this point, it's a calculated risk. In these aircraft emergency landings, think of it like a car, because if you're going too fast, the only thing you can do is take your foot off the gas. And that's essentially what we do when we pull the throttles back. If you're going downhill and the car's speeding up, again, you take your foot off the gas, or you might actually have to touch the brakes. One thing I noticed in this, when that little boy fell out of his seat, the one thing that scares the bejesus out of all of us are people that carry kids in their laps or don't have them buckled in, because they always think, oh, it's not a big deal, everybody flies. But many accidents have happened where kids or people weren't buckled in and they got hurt. In this particular emergency landing, they actually did flip the airplane over because the control on the back of the tail, the elevator that controls the pitch movement up and down of the nose, was jammed, and it was jammed in such a way that the nose wanted to go down. So what they did is flip it over, and then the nose would come back up. But of course, they couldn't land that way, and that's where things really got interesting. That's only happened that one time that I know of. So a control failing completely like that and leaving the cockpit crew with almost no control of the airplane is extremely, extremely rare. I think what I was impressed with Denzel was that he kept his cool. The guy in the right seat was younger, newer to flying. He was pretty panicked. And not that we're not at times when there's an emergency. If we can't keep our cool enough to maintain control of the airplane and work the checklist, everybody's going to die. So we realize that that's an awesome responsibility that we have, and we have to do it right.
Oh, yeah. We got one rolling back. We had both of them rolling back.
The expressions on their face, both of them, you looked at them and you went, these men are professionals, but they're scared. They know they're in a situation where this is not the normal way they're going to operate. You could see that they were already below the tops of some of the nearby buildings when the controller in New York said, do you guys want to try Teterboro or maybe New York? And Sully looks and says, we can't make it. Because you already know if they're below the tops, they're not going to be able to get over those buildings before they could ever get to the airport. And of course, that's the risk. They said, we don't want to go in the water. However, the option is to turn to the airport and probably go down amongst a bunch of buildings where there are hundreds of people that have nothing to do with this, and we can't risk their lives as well.
Try the other one.
49? Terrain. Still out?
150 knots. Terrain. Got flaps 2, you want more?
No, let's do it.
You got runway 29 available at Newark. It'll be 2 o'clock at 7 miles.
You got any ideas?
Caution. Terrain. Actually, no.
You also got to look at the memory items that I was talking about earlier, because they went through the items on the way down. The first officer was calling them out, and the captain was responding as they tried to restart the engine, and neither one would go because of the damage from the birds. And so they said, we're in trouble now. There's only one option. We're going in the water. I think that in this particular case, Sully was known as a very experienced pilot, but he also had a great deal of faith in his first officer. Jeff Skiles didn't have the amount of experience in the bus that Sully did, but he had a fair amount. And so when the captain said, we've tried everything that we can't turn, we're going down, we're headed for the water, we've got to miss the bridge, he's basically looking over saying, did I miss something? I mean, because maybe in this moment of extreme excitement, maybe there's something I missed that you noticed that I should have done. There was no other option. They were already too low. There were already quite a few people in the cabin that they were taking care of, and they didn't want to risk any more by trying to aim at the buildings because they know they wouldn't make it over it anyway. It's very simple. It's physics. You know that's not going to work. And the only open area was the water. Their biggest problem was making certain they could get it down in the water before they got to the bridge. Because if they'd hit the bridge, that would have taken everybody with. There were a few disconcerting moments. I mean, the aircraft is a twin-engine airplane, and yet the pilot that was trying to fly had 4 throttles in his hand, but I'm sure nobody noticed that but me. The part where they put a bullet through the window and all you saw was the bullet hole, that wouldn't happen. And it was later in the film that something else went through the window and the window exploded and a purse went out the window. Not happening. If that had really decompressed, people, anything that wasn't tied down would be flying toward that hole. The pressure inside the cabin is very high and the pressure outside is very low, and it's simple physics. It's trying to balance the pressure. The emergency where the bomb blew up, that probably was realistic because they were already at a low altitude. If that had happened up higher at 25 or 35,000 feet, it would have been catastrophic. That had probably destroyed the whole aircraft. But in this one, it worked. In this scene, as he's trying to land the airplane, he's got his hand on the throttles, they're all the way forward. And that wouldn't be, they'd be all the way back because he's trying to get his foot off the gas. So that didn't make any sense at all, except for the fact that he had 4 and there were only 2 engines. I guess there's a little difference of opinion in the way they presented emergency declaration, because when you see one version of the film with the airplane outside, the airplane is spinning, it's turning around. Inside, it's a different story. It just seems to be headed for the water, which of course, other than an engine fire, nobody wants to go down in the water. The decision to head down, it's like being in a car. You've got to get your foot off the gas and you've got to get on the brakes. And that's why when the guy did break into the cockpit, he said idle and speed brakes. and the guy reached up and pulled the throttles back, which is getting your foot off the gas. And then the speed brakes are little panels that come up on the wings, and they help slow you down. Thank goodness they did that, because at the speed they were going, if they'd hit the water at that airspeed, the airplane would have disintegrated. It was a good thing that fellow knew the code. He must have been a pilot to know the code to get in the cockpit. But again, if he was a pilot, it was a little strange that he didn't do what the other guy was yelling at him for when he came up there, which is get the airplane slowed down and let's try and get the nose up. And that's not really very easy to do. We see them do that in the movies all the time, but you can't just go and it'll all come up, because there's so much stress when you're pulling hard. You can put so much stress on the tail, on the elevators and the rudders, that they'll break off. This one is Snakes on a Plane.
Sir, are you telling me that your only real flight time is at the controls of a video game?
No, see, it's not a video game, all right? It's a flight simulator.
Is that PlayStation or Xbox?
PlayStation 2. And it's got an introduction by Chuck Yeager and everything.
I think the best part to me was when Kenan Thompson looked at Jackson in the right seat and said, trust me. The other fellow looked and said, okay, because right now, I don't have any other option.
I suggest you relinquish the pilot's chair to someone more experienced.
This is Agent Neville Flynn, FBI. You are talking to the only person up here who has that experience. I suggest you give him what he needs so we can land this thing.
Some of the language that the controller was using about, why don't you put somebody on the radio that knows what they're doing? I mean, they wouldn't say that. They could care less about who's flying the airplane. All they want to know is, what can we do to help? And if shutting up is the best thing we can do, then that's what we're going to do. But he was right about the fact that with a tailwind, it makes it harder to stop the airplane. It was fun when he said brakes, and Kenan said, oh, we don't have brakes in the simulator for a 747 that probably weighed 300,000 or 400,000 pounds. I think he did a pretty darn good job of instilling the confidence in his co-pilot that was necessary to get the aircraft down. And he told the controllers, hey, I may only fly flight sim, but I know what I'm doing here. And you know what? Beside the fact, there's nobody else. I had a student once, a few years back, that had been brought up on flight sim, and he thought he knew how to do everything. And I watched him do things that a couple of times really scared me. I mean, we were turning into the airport for a landing, and we were really, really high. And what he did was something that people try in flight sim. They pull the throttles back, they drop all the flaps, and they push the nose down, and they aim the airplane to the runway. And he did that with me, and I finally took it away from him, and we went around and came back and landed later, and I said, okay, this is not flight sim. You cannot do that in a real airplane. This one's executive decision. I mean, he did do a nice touchdown on the runway, but of course, this was not a runway designed for a 747, so it wasn't very wide. But he did pretty darn well. And in this movie, I remember he was supposed to be a pilot that flew small airplanes. So he knew the basics of flying. As he begins to slow down, the wings are so long on this airplane from the fuselage that he's knocking over all the airplanes that are parked close to the runway. So again, that's why we don't park aircraft close to the runway at any airport. But again, he did a pretty good job. And I love the line at the end where he says,
things almost land themselves, don't they?
Typically, when you go to a Kennedy, an O'Hare, and LAX, the runways are somewhere in the 10 to 12,000 foot length category, because it's not just simply for landing, but when these aircraft are really heavy and they're heavily loaded with fuel and passengers, it takes a while for them to get going on takeoff and build up the airspeed they need to get the airflow over the wings so that they can raise the nose and actually lift the airplane off the runway. Let's be serious. We've had some pretty serious accidents recently. The midair over the Potomac near National. The media, of course, latches on to anything related to airplanes, even when it's not terribly frightening to us as pilots. You know, somebody made a missed approach and they were going to land at DFW, but the airplane had to go around. It's not a big deal. It happens all the time. We're trained for that. I think this is an interesting mix of movies. Remember that most of these are movies and they're designed to get you to watch them. Some of the things that happen aren't completely realistic, but all in all, there were some fairly realistic scenes in some of these films. I think that having technical consultants on the lot when they're making those really shows.